Imagine you have $1.5 million. In 2004, that kind of money made you a king. It bought you a literal palace in the hills of Tuscany, a private island in Belize, or a significant stake in a burgeoning tech startup in Silicon Valley that actually builds things. You were part of the global elite. Today, in the suburbs of Toronto or Vancouver, that same $1.5 million buys you a beige, slightly drafty bungalow where the previous owner definitely died of old age, the roof is an upcoming project, and the plumbing sounds like a Victorian ghost gasping for air. Welcome to the great Canadian asset trap. You aren't paying for a house. You aren't paying for architecture. You are paying for the privilege of being a bag holder in a national cult of brick and mortar. You are participating in a grand economic experiment where a G7 nation decided it was better to bet on the walls of its bedrooms than on the brains of its children. Canada is an economy currently masquerading as a developed nation, but under the hood, it's closer to a leveraged hedge fund with a flag. We've become addicted to the most unproductive drug on the planet, unproductive debt. While the rest of the world was inventing the iPhone, sequencing the human genome, or building rockets to Mars, Canada made a different choice. We decided our primary economic engine, our moonshot, would be selling the same 4-bedroom houses back and forth to each other for 20% more every year. It's a national Ponzi scheme where the growth is just the sound of a generation's dreams being ground into the drywall. We have the highest household debt to GDP in the G7. We are walking around with the confidence of someone who just won the lottery, failing to realize the ticket was bought with a high-interest loan from our own future. In a healthy economy, capital is like water. It's supposed to flow toward the most fertile ground, toward the entrepreneur in a garage, the lab developing green hydrogen, or the factory upgrading its robotics. But in Canada, that water has been diverted into a giant concrete bathtub. Meet Brian. Brian is a brilliant software engineer. He has a patent-pending idea for a revolutionary AI-driven logistics platform. He's the kind of guy who should be the next billionaire tech titan. Brian goes to a major Canadian bank, one of the big 5, that sit like gargoyles over our economy. He brings his business plan. The loan officer, a man in a polyester suit who hasn't read a book on technology since 1998, looks at Brian like he's grown a second head. Too risky, the bank says. Where is your collateral? Do you have a house to put up against this? No. Then your intellectual property is just fairy dust. But if Brian walks back in an hour later and says, I want to buy my 4th investment condo in a flooded basement in Brampton, the bank throws money at him like he's a returning war hero. This is capital misallocation on a biblical scale. We have starved our innovators to feed our landlords. When a nation's smartest people realize that they can make more money by parking cash in a semi-detached garage than by starting a company, that nation is finished. We have turned our banking system into a giant pawn shop that only accepts title deeds. Now meet Kevin. Kevin makes $95,000 a year. In 90% of the world, Kevin is a wealthy man. But in Canada, Kevin is house poor. Kevin's mortgage is $4,800 a month. Kevin's lifestyle is a carefully curated lie. He drives a leased Audi and buys organic kale at Whole Foods, but he is exactly one interest rate hike away from eating cat food. Kevin represents the consumer debt illusion. Canada's household debt-to-income ratio is now a staggering 180%. We have treated our homes like giant ATMs. We use HELOCs, home equity lines of credit, to fund vacations to Tulum and kitchen renovations with quartz countertops to add value to a house that is already objectively overpriced. Think of the Bank of Canada as the dealer. For a decade, they provided the heroin of 1% interest rates. Everyone felt like a genius. But it's an illusion. It's the wealth effect. You feel rich, so you spend money you haven't earned. But that equity is just a claim on future labor you haven't performed yet. You are a debt slave with a nice backsplash. To keep this housing balloon from popping, the government has pulled the only lever it has left: extreme population growth. Let's be clear, this isn't a debate about immigrants. It's a debate about structural distortion. The government is bringing in over 1 million people a year into a country that only builds 200,000 homes. Imagine a pizza party where there are only 2 pizzas. Every 10 minutes, the host invites 5 more people. The host stands on a chair and screams, "Look, the party is growing." The total amount of pizza being eaten is at an all-time high. The GDP of this party is soaring. But you're looking at your plate. Your slice is getting thinner. You're getting hungrier. This is the Canada trap. We are importing demand to mask a total collapse in productivity. By flooding the market with new renters, the government has essentially created a permanent floor for real estate prices. The result? Wage suppression. Why pay a Canadian worker more when you can hire a desperate newcomer? Rental serfdom. Rent consumes 60% of a worker's paycheck. This kills the spirit of a nation. If you can't afford a roof over your head, you aren't thinking about starting the next Shopify, you're thinking about how to survive until Tuesday. The Canadian government has entered into a suicide pact with the housing market. In Canada, the housing sector accounts for a terrifyingly large portion of our GDP, much higher than in the US before the 2008 crash. If prices drop by 30%, the banking system wobbles. If the banking system wobbles, the government has to bail it out. Therefore, the government cannot let prices fall. This is the definition of moral hazard. We've signaled to every investor that housing is a risk-free bet backed by the taxpayer. When you remove the risk of failure, you remove the logic of the market. We have created a zombie economy. Capital doesn't die where it should. Bad investors are protected by policy, like the extension of mortgage amortizations to 60 or 90 years, while the young pay the price in the form of eternal rent-seeking. It's like playing a game of musical chairs where the government keeps adding more people but refuses to let the music stop, because they know the moment it does, the floor collapses and everyone falls into the abyss. We are witnessing the birth of a new class system, neo-feudalism. On one side, you have the asset class, the baby boomers and early Gen Zers who bought in the 90s for the price of a ham sandwich and are now sitting on tax-free millions. On the other side, you have this service class, the Kevins, Lindis, and Bobs, who pay the asset class for the right to exist in a city. This divide isn't based on merit, intelligence, or hard work. It's based on timing. It's a lottery where the prize was being born in 1965. This erodes the social contract. Why work 80 hours a week to be a doctor or an engineer when your neighbor's semi-detached garage earned more in capital gains last year than you did performing heart surgery? When a house earns more than a surgeon, the society has lost its mind. We are creating a permanent underclass of renters who will never own anything, while a landed gentry collects rent on the very air they breathe. Canada has earned a nickname in the global underworld, snow washing. This is the practice of cleaning dirty global money through our opaque real estate records. Our transparency laws are so porous that a shell company owned by a foreign warlord or a corrupt oligarch can buy a condo in Vancouver more easily than a local teacher can rent one. Canada isn't just a country, it's a giant, maple-flavored safety deposit box. When global capital looks for a place to hide, it buys our bedrooms. They aren't buying homes to live in, they are buying safe deposit boxes in the sky. This turns our cities into ghost cities, beautiful glass towers where no lights are on at night, while our own citizens sleep in vans down the street. We are the Switzerland of real estate, but without the high-end industry to support it. Why would a top-tier AI researcher stay in Toronto making $150,000 Canadian dollars while paying $3,500 for a one-bedroom apartment? They can go to Austin, Texas, make $300,000 US, and buy a mansion for the price of a parking spot in Toronto. This is the productivity crisis. We are exporting our smartest minds and importing low-skill labor to prop up the Tim Hortons economy. Our GDP per capita, the actual measure of how much wealth we produce per person, is falling. We are getting bigger as a country, but we are getting poorer as individuals. We are becoming a barista economy, where we all serve each other coffee while complaining about the rent, while our most innovative spirits flee south. Canada is slowly becoming a picturesque museum, a place where people come to look at the mountains but can't afford to buy a coffee. Gravity is a patient mistress and she always wins. There are only two ways this ends. Scenario A, the controlled demolition, the Japanese path. The government manages to keep the bubble from bursting, but at the cost of a lost decade. Growth remains at 0%, inflation eats away at savings, and we enter a state of permanent stagnation. Young people stop having children because they can't afford a second bedroom. The country slowly ages and withers, becoming a beautiful but hollow shell of its former self. Scenario B, the gravity check, the crash. A global shock, a massive spike in unemployment, or a final loss of international confidence causes the leverage to unwind. The equity vanishes overnight. The banks tighten their belts. The maple mirage evaporates. It's painful, it's ugly, and it ruins a million Kevins. But it's the only way to reset the price of admission for a generation that has been locked out. A country is not a real estate portfolio. A society is a promise between generations that if you work hard and contribute, you will have a stake in the future. We have broken that promise. We traded our technological potential, our industrial spirit, and our children's future for the warm, fuzzy glow of a rising Zillow estimate. We've mistaken price for value. The question isn't when the bubble pops. The question is, what will be left of our culture when we finally realize we can't live in a spreadsheet? We need to stop building shrines to our houses and start building futures for our people. Because if we don't, the only thing left of the Canadian dream will be the for sale sign on a house no one can afford to buy.